Hey guys, A.V. Songbird here, and welcome back to A.V. Songbird Reviews The Walking Dead. This is Season 1, Episode 6, actually. This is ts-19. Episode 6? I believe it's Episode 6. I can't count today. But, I wanted to start this out by saying, I've seen every episode, I've seen every season of this show, as I've said before to you guys. But like everyone else, I have episodes of mine that I absolutely love that are my favorites. I like them all, but I have my favorites. And for different reasons that I will talk about, this is one of my favorite episodes to go back and to revisit. You know, this is kind of a flashback review to the old seasons. But this is one of my favorite episodes to go back and watch. I've watched this one a lot. But when it opens up, it doesn't show anything familiar. It opens up and it shows a hospital, and we're focused on room 450. So we're on the 4th floor, obviously, but we're at room 450. And we're looking at it, and it's clean and everything. It's showing a door. It's nice and clean. And for a minute there, when it started up, I came walking in the room from out of the room, and I asked my husband, are you sure we have the right channel, the right time? You know, it looks too clean. This can't be The Walking Dead. It looks clean. You know, the world's over. It's not supposed to be clean. Well, all of a sudden, when the door opens up, and Shane comes walking out of the room, and you're like, Shane, okay, we're on the right show. Well, all of a sudden, he's standing there, and he's standing in the door to the room, and you see these military personnel come by, and they're ushering through the doctors and the nurses, and you hear the military guy who's wearing a mask yell, green tag, green tag. Well, green means good, so obviously that's good. Green tag, green tag. Does that mean that this is okay, that this is clear? What's going on? Well, Shane tries to grab the nurse as the medical guy, Shane tries to grab the nurse as the military personnel people usher her by, and the nurse pulls back and panics, you know, because she wants to keep leaving with the military guy, leaves him to fend for himself. Well, Shane runs over and grabs a hospital bed and goes to pull it over to Rick's door, and he tries to scoop Rick up, you know, to get him out of there. Well, he turns around and looks, and all of a sudden he sees military personnel shooting patients and people in the hallway. People. Like, live people that are hurting, people that are sick. They're shooting people in the hallway. So Shane freaks out and he runs over to Rick's room and he goes to scoop Rick up. Well, he looks at all the machines that Rick is hooked up to. And he puts him back down and he goes around the bed and he's going, shit, what do I do, right? Well, he turns around and he's trying to figure out a game plan, and he doesn't know what to do because Rick's hooked up to these machines, and Shane's not a medical professional. Okay, yeah, he's hooked up to the heart monitor. Yeah, he's hooked up to the IV, but Shane doesn't know what's in the IV. Shane doesn't know, you know, medically what he needs, what he doesn't need. You know, if I pull him out of this bed right now, is it going to kill him? You know, and he's got no one he can ask. So Shane's sitting there and he goes, God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do, right? And the fact that Shane's there with the state of the hospital is it's in absolute chaos at this moment. And the fact that Shane's there when shit's hitting the fan, when everything's in chaos, just showed to me that Shane was there and he was trying to get Rick out. It showed that Shane was willing to put himself possibly in harm's way to try to save Rick. He was just honestly concerned and he wanted to get him out of there. Well, all of a sudden the door goes to open, so Shane thinks quick and ducks under the bed, and one of the soldiers looks to see if anyone's in the room, and he doesn't mind Rick. Rick's just in the bed. He's a vegetable, he believes, so he just leaves the room, closes the door. Well, Shane gets up and he looks at Rick. And he goes, come on, give me a sign, give me a sign. What am I going to do? If you're going to wake up, you got to wake up now. Well, I need a sign. Well, all of a sudden you hear an explosion from outside, and all of a sudden all the electricity goes out, and the heart monitor stops. Everything stops. All the electricity's out. Well, Shane goes over, and he goes to put his head on Rick's chest to listen to Rick's chest. It's not a come on, he's listening to Rick's chest. Well, all of a sudden, he kind of cries, like sob. And he puts his hand over Rick's face, like to close his eyes, and then he goes to leave. Well, as he goes to leave, he looks up, and there's walkers coming down the hallway, so he turns and grabs the bed that he was going to put Rick in, and he closes Rick's door, he puts the bed in front of the door, locks down the wheels so the bed won't roll, covers his face, and he runs out. Well, that's the bed that was in front of Rick's door when Rick woke up. So obviously, that bed was locked in place in front of the door. That bed could have very well been the reason that the walkers didn't come in and eat Rick while he was laying there and wasn't even awake to defend himself. You know, so if you thought that Shane was an asshole that didn't care about Rick, if you thought that Shane just wanted to be with Lori, so he just let Rick die, you know. Obviously, Shane cared about Rick enough to try to get him out of there. So then we go to credits, and it comes back from credits, right? And we flash back to the CDC. Remember, we're standing outside the CDC and the shutters just rolled up? Well, we flash to the CDC, and we're back to the present. Well, Rick yells hello, and they hear a gun cock across the room. You hear the guys in the background yell, check the door, check for walkers, and they close the door. Well, you hear a gun cock, and you turn around and look, and there's a man walking into the room holding a big-ass gun that says, pay attention to me. So he asks if anyone's infected. And Rick says one of us was, but he didn't make it. Remember Jim? Poor haunted Jim that's not haunted anymore. Well, the guy that, remember we met him, he said his name was Jenner in the previous episode, remember? Well, he asks what they want. What are you doing here? What do you want? And Rick says we want a chance. Well, Jenner says that's asking an awful lot these days. And Rick says, I know it is. He accepts the fact that it's a lot to ask. Jenner considers it for a moment, and he looks to everyone. He sees Dale there, an older man. He sees women. He sees children. And he says, okay, I will, but price of admission, you're going to take a blood test. Which, smart. If he's a scientist or a doctor, if he's one or the other, even if he's a lab tech, he wants to know if they're infected. So they accept, and Jenner says, if you got anything to bring in, you bring it in now, because once this door closes, it's not opening again. So all the guys run out, and they grab all their stuff that they need, you know, the bare essentials, and they run it in, the door closes. And Jenner tells Vi to seal the doors and kill the power upstairs, and they all get down the elevator and go up or down. He introduces himself to everyone as Dr. Edwin Jenner. Daryl looks at him funny because he just introduced himself as a doctor with a gun that big. And Daryl goes, are all doctors going around packing heat like that? And Jenner says, oh, there were enough of them laying around. I familiarized myself with them. So they go down, and he starts leading them down a hallway. Well, he says they all look harmless enough, you know, except Carl. He says he'll have to keep an eye on Carl, which I like that because it made Carl laugh. You know, he recognized the fact that maybe the kids were scared, so he did that to lighten the mood. So I did like that in Jenner. It showed that he cared. He wasn't completely a cold a-hole, right? Well, he leads the whole group down a hallway, and come to find out they're underground. Carol, I believe, asked if they were underground, and he said, are you claustrophobic? And she says, a little. And he says, try not to think about it. And they find out they're underground. He takes them into the big room where the computer bank is, and he welcomes them formally to Zone 5, which is what Atlanta is. And he tells Vi to light up the main room. You see the huge computer room. Rick asks where the others are because there's no doctors in the room. There's no staff. He wants to know where they are, and Jenner says he's it. The whole group kind of looks at each other, and Lori asks after Vi because Jenner's been talking to Vi. She's been responding. Jenner says, Vi, say hello, welcome our guests. And her voice says hi. And then he says that he's all that's left and apologizes. Which I think Vi is VI, virtual interface. But that's just me personally. I haven't looked it up or anything. But to me, it would make sense. VI, virtual interface. So we flash over and they're all taking blood tests. Andrea asks Jenner what the point is to the test. If any of them was infected, they'd be showing signs. And Jenner says, I'm breaking every rule in the book, just letting you in here. At least let me be thorough, which makes sense. I mean, once those shutters are down, obviously if there's a contagion in the air, they're not going to want it to get into the CDC where they're trying to work on the cure. So it would be against all protocols for him to open that door and let anyone inside. So he's breaking all the rules to let them inside. You know, so he's not completely, you know, automaton status at this point. So Jenner explained he's breaking the rules. As Andrea gets up from the chair, she staggers, and Jenner kind of looks at her and asks, are you okay? And Jackie says Andrea hasn't eaten in a few days. None of them have. Well, we flash over to one of my absolute favorite scenes in the entire first season. It's one of my favorite scenes throughout the whole length of the show. We go to the cafeteria in the CDC, and everyone's eating dinner and drinking. They're all around the dinner table. I love this scene around the dinner table. You know, the fact that all of them are eating, they're drinking, they're laughing. It's one of my favorite absolute scenes from the entire show because it's such a normal family eating around the dinner table kind of feel to it. And they're all enjoying each other's company. It's lighthearted. They're not worried. You know, they're safe for the time being. Dale's slurring his words, so you know he's had more wine than maybe he should have. And he's talking about how children in Italy or France, you know, have wine with dinner, and he goes to pour Carl some wine. Well, Lori covers Carl's glass and says when he's in Italy or France, then he can drink. Well, Rick goes, what's the harm? It's not going to hurt anything. So everyone kind of laughs, and Lori, screw it, and she pulls her hand off, and Dale pours him some wine. Carl goes to take a drink, and he goes, oh my God, it's nasty, and everyone's cracking up. I love that moment and the lightheartedness in that moment. And then all of a sudden, Shane says, stick to soda pop, and Daryl in the background says, not you, Glenn, you're drinking tonight, man. I want to see how red your face can get. So even Daryl is relaxing in their company, and they're all having fun, just laughing, kicking back, and drinking. And to me, that was a really cool, lighthearted moment. I love that. It was just cool to see the whole group let their guard down and see them enjoying each other's company and being just people that are spending time together. Now, Rick says he feels that they should toast to their hosts, so they all do. You know, Daryl's booyah moment. Suddenly, Shane starts asking where the other doctors are, which has been sitting in the back of our minds anyway. Why is this guy the only guy there? Where is everyone? So Shane asked where the other doctors and the staff were. And Rick protests that they shouldn't do this now that they're celebrating, you know, but Shane argues this was your big plan. This was supposed to be, you know, your answer for everything. Where is everyone? He wants to know why there's only one man that they found there. So Jenner explained that most people left to be with their families when everything fell apart, which makes sense. And he said when things got overrun and the military cordon got overrun, the rest bolted. And Shane says every last one, and Jenner says no. Many people couldn't face walking out the door. They opted out. Which was a very sensitive way to put it, I thought. There was a rash of suicides. He said it was a bad time. Andrea asked him why he didn't leave. He said he just kept working, hoping to do some good. And then Glenn called, I can't tell if it's Shane or the doctor, or both. He called them a buzzkill, and then the scene ends. But we see Jenner walking him down the hallway, and he said that most of the facilities have powered down, but that the couches and the offices are comfortable, and there's cots if they would prefer them. He says there's a rec room at the end of the hall that the kids might enjoy, but that they shouldn't plug in the video games, you know, so the kids could at least have somewhere to play. And he says the same applies if you shower, go easy on the hot water. At the sound of that, the whole group perks up and hears hot water. Screw the rec room. I heard hot water, you know, which would have been my reaction. And I said, me personally, you know, if I had to bathe in a cold-ass quarry for a month, even in hot-ass Atlanta, screw sleep, screw eating, I would be tripping over everybody else there and myself to get down that hallway and get to that damn shower first. That would be my priority. I would eat later. I would sleep later. The first thing on my mind would be that damn shower. So all of a sudden, insert montage here, and suddenly I'm not the only person that thought the hot shower, you know, was the best idea in the world. And we see different members of the group realizing that showers really can be the best thing on earth. Even Andrea wasn't pitching, right? So it shows Rick past Dale in the hallway drinking straight from the bottle. It looked like Boone's Farm almost. But he's drinking straight from the bottle at this point because Rick don't give a shit right now. And Dale nods at him, and then suddenly we hear Andrea getting sick. So Dale goes in to take care of Andrea, and, you know, he tells her, get it out, and everything, and Andrea says, everything's gone. And Dale kind of laughs, you know, figuring she's sick, and says, yeah, it's always better going down. She says, I'm not talking about the wine. It's over. You know, it's over. There's nothing left. And Dale says, you know, this is our chance at a new start. And Andrea says, did you see the look on his face? It's over. There's nothing left. Don't you get that? Which Dale's trying to be optimistic. Dale's looking at, okay, everything's over. This is the end, but it's not the end. We have a chance to start over. Andrea's looking at it as far as she knows, everything's fallen apart. Everything's over. It's over. It's done with. There is no more. There's no restarting. You know, so she's coming to grips with that, and it just shows their different mindsets in that moment, which, you know, it would be, are you optimist or pessimist? Are you going to give up in that situation, or are you going to hold out hope that, you know what, as long as we're still here, as long as we're still alive, you know, we could find out what happened, we can move forward from here, which, like I said, showed their different mindsets. You know, it made Andrea physically ill to think of the fact that everything might be completely over and that she's not at a stage yet where she can move forward. Now, we flash over to Rick, who's still carrying the bottle. We think it's the same bottle. I don't know if it's the same bottle. It looks like the same bottle. So he comes to find Jenner, and Jenner's sitting at his computer terminal going over the numbers, and Rick asks him how the blood looks, and Jenner says there's no surprises. Now, Rick said, I came to thank you, and Jenner says, you did. Rick falls on his ass. You hear him hit, and you know it hurt, but he falls on his butt, and he goes to sit, and Jenner asks if he's all right. You know, and Rick says, you don't know what it's like out there. You may think you do, but you don't. You know, he says they'd have died out there, that there's too many of those things, that it was only a matter of time. He said his wife, his boy, you know, I never let them in on it. I never let them know how I felt, which you see fear in Rick's eyes. You see uncertainty. You see him questioning himself. And this is the first time we've seen that since he found the group. You know, in front of everyone else sober, he looks like he knows what he's doing, like he's a man of conviction. He's a man that doesn't blink. Now that he's drinking, he's letting down his guard, and he's talking to Jenner man to man. You know, you don't know what it's like out there. You think you do, but this is what it's like, and we'd have died out there. This is the first time he's actually saying that he doesn't know what he's doing. And you can hear it in his speech. He's had quite a bit to drink for him to say this, and you can see the fear, the uncertainty, and everything, right? And Jenner tells him it'll all be okay. And I know it affected me so bad to see the uncertainty in Rick's eyes and to see him not as the leader, but as the human. You know, and then it flashes over and Lori comes walking into the rec room where Carol's sitting on the couch and Sophia and Carl are playing checkers. And she says, are there any good books? And you find out there's a bunch of books there, enough to last them for years if they stay there for years, you know, because they could. And the kids get up to go to bed, and Carol's talking about how it might be the first night they get some sleep. It's a miracle. And they all leave, and Lori's left alone in the rec room, so she goes over the titles and the books on the shelf. Well, Shane comes in. And he says, I'm going to tell you some things, and you're going to listen. She says, now's not the time. They face off over Shane telling Lori that her husband was dead. Shane tells Lori then what happened in the hospital when he was actually, you know, going after Rick. And he tells her about the state the hospital was in, which apparently he had never told her this before. And he says he didn't know what to do. He was hooked up to machines. He said he put his head on Rick's chest and he didn't hear a heartbeat. There's no way he could have survived. And Lori said he did. Well, Shane said, well, if I had told you that Rick was still alive, would you have left Atlanta? Or not Atlanta, but your house. Would you have left the city? Would you have come with me? And Lori looks at him like it dawns on her that she wouldn't have. And he said, I saved your life. Yours and your son's. I saved your life. And he says, you know, I would trade places with Rick if I could. I still would. You know, and he says he loves her. I know you love me too, or you couldn't have been with me the way you were. Well, he starts making advances on her because he's been drinking and he's thinking about her and everything that's going on, and he's haunted. And he starts making moves. Well, she starts trying to fight him off and he's not taking the hint. Well, she reaches out and scratches him, and all of a sudden he hauls back, and it's like it just dawned on him what he did and what he was trying to do. And you see this horrified look on Shane's face and the fear that he sees in Lori's eyes, and he knows he put it there, and she knows what he just tried to do, and they're both in shock. So Shane turns around, punches the door, or the wall, and walks out the door and leaves Lori there. Well, she falls apart into tears because here's a man she trusts, here's a man she was with, her husband's best friend, and they had an impasse. And what could have happened there if she hadn't stopped him? So she dissolves into tears. Well, it flashes over to the office that Rick and Lori and Carl are sleeping in. Carl's sleeping on the couch. Lori's in bed with her back to the door, and she's got tears on her face. Well, Rick staggers into the room, blind-ass drunk, staggers into the room, falls into the bed, and he pulls Lori over to look her in the eye, and he says, you know, we don't have to be afraid anymore. We're safe here. And he sees her tears and maybe thinks it's because she was afraid. Well, he says, we don't have to worry anymore. We're safe here. And she turns over and he draws her into his arms and holds her and cuddles her because he loves her. You know, and he honestly feels we're safe here. It's over. We're good now. Well, she sits there and she's crying, and it's not the walkers she's afraid of in that moment. It's Shane. And they're in the CDC. They're supposed to be safe, and she's afraid of him and what he did. You know, and it fades out. We fade out and fade into the next morning. Which goes to show that the walkers aren't the only threat, that people can be a threat too to me in that scene. But we fade out and fade into the next morning, and the whole group's gathered around the breakfast table the next morning. And Rick comes walking in, and the others are teasing Glenn because Glenn's sitting there like this. And if you've ever had a serious night of drinking after not drinking like ever, or after a long time, Glenn's sitting there like this, praying to God a truck runs over his head, basically. He's got that look on his face like, kill me now, please, end my misery. And the others are giving him shit. Well, T-Dog's fixing him eggs and goes, come on, protein helps the hangover. Let's get you some greasy bacon. And Glenn's hating him, right? Well, Rick asks Lori to get him aspirin, so you know that Rick's suffering too. Glenn's not the only one, and Glenn's going, don't ever, ever let me drink again. Till next time. Well, Shane comes in, bids him good morning, and T-Dog asks him what happened to his neck, and he says, I must have done it in my sleep. Well, Rick goes, you never done that before? Well, Shane's glaring at Lori because Lori did it, and she's avoiding eye contact. Well, Jenner comes in and says good morning. Everyone says good morning, Doc, and Dale asks him, I don't want to start in on you right away, and Jenner kind of laughs and says, but you will anyway, and Andrea says, we're not here for the eggs. Well, it fades out, fades in. We're in the computer room. And he comes up and he tells Vi he wants a playback of ts-19. Remember the title of this episode? He says he wants a playback of ts-19, and a brain scan comes up on the monitor. Jenner asks for enhanced internal view on the brain scan, and it brings up the brain scan. And I loved the image on the screen of the synapses firing in the brain. I loved that. That would be the coolest, screensaver, the synapses firing. But the human body and how it works has always fascinated me. So stuff like that fascinates me. I love learning stuff like that. But he explains how the synapses work and explains that this is a vigil that they're watching, the replay of the vigil on the screen. And it dawns on the others that this is someone who's died. And they ask him, who is it who died? And he said, subject 19. That it was someone who was bitten and infected and volunteered to have the process recorded so that it could be used as a learning tool for the doctors and scientists who are trying to figure out a cure for the disease. So he has Vi fast forward to the next event, and the scan shows the synapses beginning to go dark on the screen as he explains what happens to the brain and the body as the infection sets in. He explains that it's like meningitis in the way it attacks the brain. Now, the synapses stop firing and go dark, the body goes into shutdown, and it all goes dark, and we have clinical death. Now, the group is understandably deeply troubled by this because they've only seen people from the outside go down. They didn't know what it actually did to your body. So they're troubled by this. Now, Lori explains, because Andrea looks upset and Jenner looks at her, Lori explains that Andrea lost her sister, and Jenner explains that he lost someone dear to him too and gives his condolences. He knows what she's going through. Now, he tells Vi to fast forward to the next event, and he says the shortest time recorded between death and reanimation has been 3 minutes, and that the longest time they know is 8 hours. Now, we learn that the infection reignites just the brainstem. It's just enough to get them up and get them moving. They're like an empty shell. It's just them up and moving. It's the basic motor functions. It's not, the front of the brain. It's not the neocortex. It's not the frontal lobe. It's the brain stem is all that's reactivated. Now, we see on the scan that the rest of the brain is completely dark. It's just a shell driven by mindless instinct is all that comes back. Now, we see the scans show that Jenner shot the person in the head and the brain goes dark again. And the group questions him on it. Now, he reveals that he knows next to nothing about it, or, reveals very little. He says everything went down, that communications directives, that he's been in the dark for almost a month. And Andrea posits that, well, obviously you're saying that there's nothing anywhere, right? Because communication went down. And the group is in shock over it and frightened to think of it on such a scale, that it's possibly not just this area, that it could be more than this area. Now, Dale turns around and asks about a clock up on the wall. He notices that there's a clock up on the wall in digital reading down to 0, and he wants to know what happens when it reaches 0. Jenner says that's when the basement generators run out of fuel. And they ask what happens, but Jenner clams up and walks out, so Rick asks Vi what happens when the power runs out. And Vi reports that's when facility-wide decontamination will occur. The scene fades out, right? The next scene shows Rick, Shane, T-Dog, and Glenn running down the stairs trying to figure out what happened. And they go through the basement and they go to the generators. There's all kinds of empty fuel drums, and they have just the one left on the generator. Well, while they're down there, the emergency lighting comes on, the main lighting switches off, and they find out it's just that one can. Meanwhile, it goes back to upstairs. The air kicks off in the Grimes office where Lori and Carl are hanging out. Meanwhile, Jenner's in his office looking at a picture on his desk of a woman. He's got a troubled look on his face, and he tells the picture, which I would imagine is his wife or his sister, someone close to him. He says he did the best with the time that he could. He hopes that they'd be proud of at least that much. And he gets up and looks out the window and said, we always think that there's going to be more time, and the lights go out, and he says, then it runs out. Which, again, that's a running theme in the show. Time. Time is a running theme in this show, that we always think we have more time. We're sitting here now just taking for granted the fact that we have tomorrow. If the world blew up, how would we know? Now, we come to the next scene, and it shows Jenner comes walking down the corridor as the others come out of their rooms, and they ask him what's going on. Jenner swipes Daryl's half-empty bottle on the way through, takes a swig, tells them that different powers are being prioritized. Air, lights, computers. Shh. And Dale says air isn't a priority, and Jenner says it's not up to him, that Zone 5 is shutting itself down. Well, the whole group is wondering, what the hell does that mean? Why does a building do that? Well, Jenner says it's dropping all non-essential uses of power, and that it's designed to keep the computers running until the last minute. What freaked me out most about that moment was you see how much the group is freaking out at what's going on. They don't know what's happening. And you see how cold and clinical Jenner's acting. You see how very shut down he's become. And the fact, you go back and look, and he's been very cold from the beginning, aside from him making Carl feel better and feeding the group and taking him in. He's being cold and clinical right now, and matter of fact, about how he said that it's prioritizing power and it's shutting itself down. Now, the others are growing more concerned by the minute because the clock's running down. They don't know what's going on or the implications are. Well, there's 31 minutes left on the clock, and they don't know what's going to happen in a half hour. Jenner returns the bottle to Daryl and says the French were the last to hold out as far as he knew to Andrea. And he said that while their people were bolting and committing suicide in the hallways, the French scientists held out until the end, and that they were close to a solution. Then the power grid failed, the same as what's happening here. He said they ran out of juice and was talking about how dumb it was that the world runs on fossil fuels. Now, Rick says, I don't care, everyone grab our stuff, we're leaving, just get your stuff and let's get out. So they all go to run to grab their stuff and to get out before the timer runs out, because they don't want to be there if there's not going to be any power in any way for them to sustain themselves. Well, all of a sudden an alarm goes off, and they panic as the 30-minute timer hits 30. Well, Jenner closes the doors to lock them in the computer room. He starts recording a video, says he's recording on his computer, and the group descends on him to find out what the hell's going on. Why is the door closed? Why did you lock us in? Now, the others have to hold Daryl back because he's going to kick the crap out of Jenner, and Rick starts in on Jenner trying to be at least, somewhat composed about this. Now, Jenner says the door won't open again and that it's better this way. I told you once that door closed, it wouldn't open again. It's better this way. And the others tense, wanting to know what's better this way. They want to know what's going on. They know he's not telling them everything. And Jenner starts going off on them about, do you know what goes on in this place? Do you know what happens here? And how there's things they deal with, smallpox, different diseases they dealt with there that you don't want getting out ever. Now, the way he said ever sent a chill through me. The way he said you don't want things getting out ever. The whole group suddenly looked shocked at his outburst. I probably had the same look on my face going, what do you mean getting out ever? And he explains that in the case of a power failure or a terrorist attack, that HITs are deployed to stop all organisms from getting out, which, what is an organism? Pause the video right now and go look up the definition of organism right now. He explains, Vi defines, because he has Vi define it, because maybe he's not able to define it, maybe he doesn't have it in him to define it. Vi defines HITs as explosives that set the air on fire, and that is stronger than every other explosive aside from nuclear. Think of that for a minute as the 30-minute timer is running down. Now, these are explosives you set off where the greatest loss of life and damage to structure is desired. It sets the air on fire. Now, Jenner says it's an end to pain, sorrow, grief, regret, that it's an end to everything. It sets the air on fire. Pretty sure the look on my face was like the rest of the group, because you guys know me. I get into shows when I watch them. I'm sitting there with the same look everybody else had, right? Everyone else panics and freaks out, obviously, and you look to Andrea and Jackie, and for some reason that freaked me out, they seemed either to be in shock or they seemed to be accepting of it. Scene fades out, fades in, and Daryl throws his bottle at the door. Obviously, he's not happy. That's Darylism for not happy. And he and Shane take axes to the door. They're trying to break the door down to get everybody out. And the women and children are sitting on the floor crying and huddled together, holding each other. I think Jenner was looking at it as, when this happens, it's a mercy killing. It's an end to sorrow, grief, everything. It's an end. It's over. It's peace. And he explains that the doors are meant to withstand a rocket launcher. Well, Daryl comes at him with an axe and said, your head ain't. Well, the others try to hold him back so he won't do that and shove him off. Jenner tells Rick, you do want this. You know, last night you said that you knew it was only a matter of time before everyone you loved was dead. You know, and the others, this is the first they've heard about what Rick said, and Rick's family is sitting there. So they all look at him and turn accusing eyes to Rick, and Shane goes, did you really say that? Is that what you believed? And Rick said, I had to keep hope alive. You know, didn't I? And Jenner argues there is no hope, that there never was. Rick says that it may not be Jenner, but that there's got to be hope somewhere. There's going to be hope somewhere. And Andrea says, what part of everything's gone do you not understand? And Jenner said, your friend's right. You know, this is what takes us down. This is our extinction event. And the group goes quiet, still in shock. And Carol, in absolute tears, says, this isn't right. You can't keep us here. You know, Jenner says he doesn't understand that it's a millisecond, no pain. And Carol says, my daughter doesn't deserve to die like this. Which, if you're a parent, you know, and you have a kid, you're not going to want your child to die that way. You know, you're not going to want your child to die that way. You're going to fight to want them to have a chance, to want you to have a chance, to help them have a chance. And Jenner says, okay, Shane's pissed. Maybe at what Carol said, maybe at her reaction, maybe at Jenner, but Shane is pissed. And he draws his gun on Jenner and he tells him, open the door or I'll blow your head off. Which argument, if you blow his head off, how's he going to open the door? You're not going to help the situation. You're going to die anyway. But Shane's got a temper problem. We've already established that. Rick fights Shane off and knocks him down and goes to keep talking with Jenner, trying to talk sense into him and get him to let them out of the room. He says he doesn't believe that there's no hope, and he doesn't believe that Jenner believes it either. He says, you know, if you believe there was no hope, you'd have quit or run like the rest. You didn't. You know, you stayed. Obviously, you think that there's hope. You know, you took the hard road. And Jenner said, it's not because I wanted to. I made a promise to her. And he points to the black screen and he says, my wife. And it dawns on the group suddenly who the test subject was. And it dawns on us who the woman in the picture must have been. That test subject 19 was his wife. And Jenner says, she was the Einstein of this place. I was just someone that worked here. She could have helped save us. I just worked here. I did the best I could. And he sits there. God, what was it? Meanwhile, Daryl's in the background taking an axe to the door, trying to get the door open. And Rick tells Jenner, your wife didn't have a choice, but that Jenner does. His wife is dead, but Jenner's not. Jack. That all the group wants is a choice, like Jenner had. They want a chance to live, like Jenner had a chance, like he has a chance to save them. And Lori begs Jenner, please just let us keep trying as long as we can, which you'd want a choice. You'd want a chance to live one more damn day with your family, one more chance to get out there and to try to do it right, to survive. And Jenner says he can't open topside. But he opens the blast doors and the group runs to the doors, grabbing their gun bag, and they grab Daryl's crossbow as they go. Well, Rick tells Jenner he's grateful for what he's doing. And Jenner says the day will come when you won't be. And he goes to shake Rick's hand and he pulls him in and he whispers something in Rick's ear that we're not allowed to hear. And the group tells him, come on, we got, I think it was like 4 minutes left. You know, we got to go. Glenn yells, we got to go. So they all go to leave. Well, Jackie stays there. And T-Dog goes to grab her hand. Jackie says there and said she plans to stay, that she doesn't want to wind up like Jim and Amy. And T-Dog says this is insane. And Jackie says this is the first sane thing in a long time. I'm staying. Well, they can't talk her out of it, so they go to leave. Well, Andrea says, I'm staying too. Well, Dale says no. Well, they tell the group to go, so the group runs. You know, they've got like 3 minutes and 11 seconds left on the clock, so they go. Well, Dale stands there with Andrea, and the group's running like hell to get up the stairs. They got 3.5 minutes to get upstairs because the elevator's shut down. Remember the electricity? So, the group gets upstairs. And they try to break the windows. They're trying to break it with axes. They're trying to break it with stairs. They can't break it. So Shane tries to shoot it. He can't shoot it. Well, Carol says, here, Rick, I found this in your pocket when you showed up at camp. It's the grenade that he found in the tank. So he takes it and he puts it next to the window and pulls the pin and he throws it, right? And he ducks for cover. Well, the window shatters and they all run out to get to the cars, taking out walkers along the way. Now, we flash back to Dale downstairs right after the window blows, and Dale's trying to talk Andrea into leaving with him, and she says, you know, Amy's dead, you need to go. He says, Amy wouldn't want this, and she said, Amy's dead and you need to go, I'm staying. Well, he sits down and says he's staying, and she tells him basically, don't pull this, Dale, and he says, no, I'm not pulling anything. If you're staying, I'm staying too. You don't get to stay, make someone care, and then check out. You don't get to give up when you've got me and you'd leave me by myself. I would rather die with you than be on my own. So he says the matter's settled. Well, meanwhile, the group is running like hell across the lawn because they want to live. They don't want to give up. They're fighters. So they go and they all jump into the different vehicles. And all of a sudden, they go to leave. Lori spots Andrea and Dale coming out of the building as the clock's running down inside. And Dale and Andrea, Rick honks the horn. Dale and Andrea hop down behind the sandbags. And all of a sudden, inside, Jackie grabs Jenner's hand. And she's got tears rolling down her face, but she looks accepting. She looks peaceful. And she holds his hand and smiles at him. And then all of a sudden, the explosion goes off and the entire CDC goes up in like this wave of rolling fire and it disintegrates under the fire and the blast. And God, what was it? The whole group, after the shockwave goes away and the plume of smoke just rises and billows out and fills the air, the whole group looks like they're in shock over what's just happened. Like it's dawning on them now what just happened, what could have happened, how close they came to dying. And Glenn opens the door and leans out the door and tells Andrea and Dale, get in. And they get in the car. Well, they all take off. The caravan takes off. And it shows the billowing smoke filling the air and how little is left of the CDC. And the music cues up as they drive off. And it fades away to dark with them pulling away. Now, I love this episode. You know, just the first couple of episodes, you know, it was them at the camp and it was introducing us to everyone, but everything they learned at the CDC and everything that happened in that, I think they were there for like a day and a half, maybe. They were just there overnight and into the next morning, maybe into the early next afternoon. But they were there for such a short amount of time versus how long they were at the quarry, and they found out so much about what was happening, not just at the quarry, not with them in their immediate area right in front of their faces, but what was possibly happening on a larger scale. Because you would have the question, you know, is the CDC fighting this? Is there anything left? Is there scientists working on a cure? Did they have a cure? My thought was, you hear about it in shows and stuff, you know, where people try to come up with a cure and then it ends up being them that, you know, started it, and they were trying to get different contracts so that they could make a lot of money. You've seen it in shows. So part of me was wondering, were they writing it so that maybe France put it out? You know, not me trying to be against any country. I'm not like that. But part of me just posited and wondered if maybe they were trying to say that that's where it started. You know, that's why maybe they were closest to a solution. You know, but it makes you wonder about the state of the whole world, not just the group. And yeah, this is 39 minutes long. I'm sorry these reviews are so long, but I'm giving an in-depth analysis and my opinion on it in depth. I really loved this episode, though, because it showed the group being people, not just their roles in the group, and that it even hit Rick what the scale was, and it showed him fall apart and actually show that he's not as sure of himself as he likes to play, as he likes to put across to us. So that was the closer for season 1. The whole first season I absolutely love because it did such a good job of introducing these characters and telling you what was going on in the world, and it leaves you on a cliffhanger because you don't know what Jenner said to Rick, but the look on his face after Jenner said whatever he said was just shock and disbelief and what looked like fear and concern to me. So you want to come back for the next season to find out what Jenner said to Rick. You know, it left off in a cliffhanger like it should have, that you want answered when the show comes back. So that was the end of season 1. I think it's episode 6. It's ts-19 of The Walking Dead. And even in those first short 6 episodes, most series have a first season that's much longer. This one only had 6 episodes. What I really appreciated was the fact that even in just 6 episodes, we have the established show. We have, okay, this is what's going on. We don't know where the group's going from here, but this is what's going on with them and the state of the world. This is what, you know, is happening. So I really love that first season, and no matter how many seasons go by, I always find myself going back to that first season because they did such a good job with it. But this has been season 1 of AV Songbird Reviews The Walking Dead. I hope you guys are enjoying this season, and I hope you guys will be back for season 2 when I start reviewing season 2. That'll start next week. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking of these. I'd love to hear your take on these episodes to get the discussion to continue. I know I have new people viewing it all the time and talking to me about it all the time. So I'm going to let you guys go, and I hope to see you in the next video. This has been AV Songbird. Bye, guys.